funding to data to markets to capacity building, events, and so forth that helps them to push their businesses out there. We're also heavily invested in capacity building through trainings, workshops, events, podcasts, and several other mechanisms through which we bring skills for these entrepreneurs and their staff to grow their businesses and acquire the required skills to enable them to do that. Lastly, we are heavily also invested in program implementation, whereby we partner with development institutions and partners to design and implement support programs that enables them have access to small grants and to capacity building for their businesses. So if you're an agribusiness entrepreneur out there and you're looking for a way to scale your business, it is definitely a first point of call to join the Nourishing Africa Hub and engage. I would be delighted to engage in the chat with you all, and I wish you all a fantastic event today. Thank you so much, Akego.
Thank you, Ramat. Next, I invite Temi Adegoroye, partner at Sahel Consulting and the head of the Abuja office. Welcome, Temi.
Thanks very much, Akego. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Temi, as Akego introduced, Temi Adegoroye. I'm a partner at Sahel Consulting. I currently head the Abuja office, and I'm delighted to be here. Welcome all to this meeting. At Sahel Consulting, we have a vision to be recognized as the most trusted consulting partner and point of reference in the African agriculture and nutrition landscape, integral to building effective and efficient value chains and attaining food security. And our mission is to transform Africa's agriculture and nutrition landscape through tailored, innovative, market-based research, strategic advisory services, training, and innovative business and ecosystem solutions to impact communities and achieve sustainable growth. And through our work, we are impacting our communities and improving the livelihoods for farmers and other stakeholders across the several value chains where we operate. For more than 10 years, we have partnered with government agencies, with private sector companies, research institutions, and leading international development organizations to design, to execute projects and programs focused on developing and strengthening various aspects of the agricultural and nutrition value chain. And we have a range of services covering in-depth market research analysis across very key value chains, leveraging our relationships with key stakeholders, including farmers, including research institutes, private companies, and even private sector, public sector stakeholders. And also leveraging a network of our feed consultants across local communities in West Africa. We also provide tailored advisory services, including business and strategic plans, market entry strategies, landscape mapping, feasibility studies for our various clients. And we support our clients also in implementing some of the business strategies that we help them to develop. Such as provision of governance support, hiring senior leadership, constituting boards, and setting up systems and structures that foster operational excellence within their organizations. Also, with our data-driven research and analysis, we provide policy recommendations to governments and also to international donors and development organizations. And we collaborate with research institutes and other stakeholders to launch catalytic businesses and innovative programs based on the gaps that we identify in the landscape from our work in the landscape. Also, we do a lot of work in training, capacity building. We train key stakeholders, including farmers and agribusinesses, in partnership with both academic and research institutions. And we've implemented quite a number of high impact intervention programs across key value chains, including seed system related studies in cassava and yam. We're currently implementing a dairy program focused on catalyzing the local dairy value chain in Nigeria, which really it's a private sector-led initiative in collaboration with six private dairy processors and also strategic partnerships with the government and other stakeholders. Thank you so much, and I wish you a very good outing today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Timmy. Last but not least, Nina Oduro, co-founder of Dine Diaspora. Welcome, Nina.
Thank you so much. And hi, everyone. Really glad and excited to be here and partner for this event. I'm the co-founder of Dine Diaspora, a Washington-based agency that connects people and brands to African food culture. We believe African food culture is the expression of the linkages between people and the foods that draw influences from the continent of Africa and the diaspora. At Dine Diaspora, we work with the talent behind the food, the chefs, the product makers, and connect them to opportunities such as work opportunities, but also visibility and amplification opportunities so that they can not only grow their brands, but connect them to the resources that they need so that they can thrive in a fast-paced and ever-changing food system. So glad to be here and looking forward to the event.
Thank you to our three partners for your support. I'm delighted to welcome our keynote speaker, Dr. Ed Mabaya. Dr. Mabaya is a scholar and a development practitioner with more than 2 decades of experience working on development, agribusiness value chains, and food security issues with a regional focus on sub-Saharan Africa. He's a research professor in the Department of Global Development, international professor in College of Agriculture and Life Science, and a senior research associate in the Charles H. Dyson School of Applied Economics and Management at Cornell University. His teaching, research, and outreach work focuses on food security and economic development in Africa. Previously, he was the division manager of agribusiness development at the African Development Bank, where he managed continent-wide investments, partnerships, and research in support of the Feed Africa strategy. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Mabaya.
Thank you so very much. I'm delighted to be here. Good day, good evening, good morning, colleagues, wherever you're joining us from. I'm delighted to be here to share with you some thoughts on this very important and timely conversation, talking about Africa's contribution to global food. Next slide, please. I will be very brief. Let's start from the very beginning, what I think is the key problem statement that gets us here today. I think that Africa suffers from what Chimamanda Ngozi described as the danger of a single story when it comes to its relationship with food. For most people, the association between Africa and food is often very negative. This picture here that I see of children lining up for food aid is what typifies the discussion around Africa and food. Now, there is a time and place for that discussion, and I assume that maybe about 90% of the conversation at the World UN Summit is going to be focusing on that. But this is not what this session is about today. This session is about telling the other story, the often untold story of Africa's great and immense contribution to global food. And this is what I want us to talk about. Next slide, please. To get to understand this dialogue, it's useful for me to think of, and I've structured my talk this way. Let's think about food in 3 different layers. There is food as a commodity. We talk about food and nutritional security, international trade. Indeed, if you work in a space like mine, you spend about 90% of your time discussing food as a commodity. But we know people don't eat commodities, they eat cuisine. So the next layer under that is food as a cuisine, where we want to talk about cultural heritage, diets and restaurants, prepared food, the stuff that makes us all hungry. The last layer, which I'll talk about, is food as a brand. This is where you talk about manufacturing and value addition, sales, revenue, profit, trademarks. Really, this is a part of food that makes money. And I want to make sure that we have time for that discussion here. Excited that they're really indeed entrepreneurs that are really venturing in that space. Next slide. So let's start off with the top layer, food as a commodity. I bet you most of us do not know that most of the foods that we eat today globally have their roots in Africa. Let's talk about some grains: African rice, pearl millet, sorghum, teff, fonio, all originated in Africa. When it comes to legumes, we're talking about black-eyed peas, or also known as cowpeas, bambara nut, lab, all from Africa. Vegetables: okra, watermelon, bitter tomato, Ethiopian kale, and importantly, tree crops such as cola nut, that is used to make Coca-Cola, oil palm, shea, that's used to make shea butter, coffee. I bet most people don't know right now that, when they buy their coffee from Starbucks, that this is a product that had its origin on the African continent. Tubers, you're talking about yams, plantains, and taro. All these products were first domesticated and grown commercially in Africa and spread around the world. So that's at the top layer, Africa's contribution to global agricultural commodities and food. Next slide, please. Now, I'm sure you've heard this number before. Upwards of $60 billion of food is imported into Africa every year. And this is a big concern for everybody. But I bet you did not ever hear the other side of that story. That is, Africa exports upwards of $40 billion in terms of food to the rest of the world. About 1/3 of that is fruits, vegetables, and nuts, coming mostly from South Africa and North Africa, and going into Europe, Middle East, North America, and Asia. Another, almost 10% of that is actually cocoa, which comes from West Africa, mostly from Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire or Ivory Coast. More than 60%, more than 2/3 of the world's global cocoa comes from those two countries alone. So the next time you're eating or enjoying your chocolate, chances are that it came from either Ghana or Cote d'Ivoire. And please remember that. You see other contributions in food, fish, coffee, tea, oilseeds, sugars, flours, and others. So Africa, even when we're importing a lot of food, we still are making a very big contribution to global food in terms of the commodities that we're exporting out of the continent. Now, let's go to the second layer. Away from commodities. Next slide. Let's talk about the stuff that makes us hungry. This is the cuisine side. Next slide. Yes, this is the stuff that makes us hungry. We don't eat wheat. We don't eat maize. We don't eat wheat. We eat bread. We don't eat maize. We eat ugali or saza. We don't eat rice. We eat jollof, and it's prepared food. This picture here just shows you the tapestry, the broad range of foods that emerge from Africa, from Angola, Ethiopian cuisine, Morocco, Cameroon, Zimbabwe, South Africa. Foods from Africa are as diverse as the people of Africa, the languages, the cultures, the religions of Africa. Very rich and diverse. And this is what I want us to start thinking about now. When we convert those commodities, we prepare them differently in every country. Every African country you go to will prepare their foods differently in line with the culture. Next slide. So this map, this is a food map of African cuisine from tasteatlas.com. You can, if more than welcome to visit it. In summary here, the key points I want to make is the food that comes from Africa is very diverse, as I already said, but it's also highly nutritious. The food is, different starches, different vegetables, different meats. It's also very delicious. If those who have not traveled around Africa, I believe one of the great privileges of traveling across Africa is to taste the broad cuisine. When you go from Mozambique to Kenya, to Nigeria, to Lagos, to Ivory Coast, you get a mix of different flavors and foods that represent the cultures of those places. And all these foods, by the way, are most of them very healthy with a good balance of starch, meat, and vegetables that are supposed to sustain a good diet. Lastly, I want to say too that Africa's diet is evolving. It's not a static thing at all. People now in Africa are eating pasta, they're eating, rice, they're eating things that were not there before. So let's not think of African cuisine as a static thing only, but something that is actually evolving. So when it comes to the spread of African cuisine to the rest of the world, I think there are really two key chapters that have a significant role to play. The first one is the unfortunate history of dark history of slave trade, where just in West Africa alone, there was arguably about 12 million Africans were forcibly removed from the continent in the transatlantic slave trade. When these people moved from the continent, they took with them the commodities that they were growing, the spices that they used, and the method that they used to prepare foods. If you travel today to South America, the Caribbean, North America, you see signatures of these foods that remind you of these foods that are still being eaten in West Africa. You eat plantains, there's gumbo, there's okra, all these foods. Wherever you see Black people in North and South America, you find that heritage remains to present day today.
I mean, it's...
in addition to this, we also have Africans that have migrated.
We always say we start ours at 5 till 8.
Sorry about that. There's somebody who has got their microphone on. If you don't mind muting yourself. In addition to that, wherever Africans have migrated around the world, they've also taken their key ingredients and ways of cooking food. Whenever I go home, my home country, Zimbabwe, I take clothes and other goodies, electronics, but what I take back is often food. And with this, is African diaspora is growing. Also, African cuisine is being introduced to other parts of the world. The third and final frontier, where I think Africa still has a long way to go, is food as it is represented today in your modern day supermarket. This is the last frontier that Africa has to conquer. Food in your nearby grocery store, supermarket. You go to Carrefour, you go to Walmart, you go to ShopRite. That frontier there still has a lot that can be said about presence of African foods. When I go to my neighborhood grocery store, I do see maybe 3 or 4 different aisles of Italian food. When I look for African food, it might be one small corner in that store that is relegated to a few products. Now you're talking about Italy, one country, compared to an entire continent, Africa. So we still have a long that we can do there to get our foods packaged, value-added, and prepared for the modern day retail. This story is not only in Africa, it's not only abroad, but when you travel in Africa, you also see that our own supermarkets in Africa are filled with products and commodities from other parts of the world. And it's often very difficult for local products to make it through there. So this, fortunately, over the last 2 decades, that image is changing. And thanks to a conversation like what we're having here today, that story and narrative is changing. No longer are the top brands in Africa just as simple multinational companies like Coca-Cola, but you're now finding more and more African-owned, African origin brands that are starting to dominate on the scene. Here's a list of the top 100 brands and products for food across the African continent, and they continue to grow and grow, and most of them are increasingly becoming African as well. Now, next slide. I have some lessons to share with you on this. How do we get African products to be present on more and more international shelves? I used to teach a marketing course on agricultural marketing course. And I discovered that Africa's best known brand outside of Africa is Amarula. I must say I was a little bit disappointed that it's an alcoholic beverage, but I think there are some key lessons from that brand that are worth sharing with some of you here. First of all, why this brand is so strong is that you have to establish strong brand presence in your own home country. South Africans drink Amarula and they take it out with them. You follow the diaspora. Wherever Africans go, they take these products with them. Wherever South Africans go, they take these products with them to give as presents to their friends. So third, you have to negotiate shelf space based on limited African products. Many of those international retail outlets, they're really trying to have much more diverse palette of foods on the shelves. And there is quite a space there that can be made on the Walmarts of the world to get the African products in there. Fourth, distribution systems matter. When you're talking about getting food from, the village to the nearby urban areas to the international markets, you have to establish strong distribution networks. Last but most importantly, every food has a story. And sometimes that story is more powerful than the food itself. So when people are eating African cuisine, they want to hear the story behind the food. Now, I must admit, I'm not always comfortable with this Africa is an exotic brand, but there's something to be said about taking the story of our own African heritage, owning that space, telling the story, and spreading that good news and good food around the world. Now, in closing, I want to say that I am delighted and excited that we're going to be hearing from entrepreneurs across Africa who are doing amazing things. I do share the vision that Changing Narrative Africa is putting forth for celebrating Africa's contribution to global food ecosystem, showcasing our innovations and cooking methods with the rest of the world, amplifying and scaling proudly African food and beverage brands, and sharing diversity and richness of Africa's gastronomic heritage. With that, I want to say thank you for listening, and I do wish us a successful session. And please do share African cuisine with the rest of the world and with your friends and family. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mabaya. Terrific insights. As you said, food from Africa is as diverse as its people. And beyond our commodities, the world deserves to experience the diversity of African food, not just in restaurants, but also in grocery stores. We'll have time later on in the program to dig deeper into some of the points that were raised. Please join me again in giving Dr. Mabaya a round of applause. That was fantastic. We value your vision and your passion, which, like you said, resonates with the vision of Changing Narratives Africa. So thank you once again. At this point in our program, I'm delighted to welcome Ndidi Munyeli, the founder of Changing Narratives Africa. Ndidi is a serial entrepreneur, the founder of Leap Africa, Nourishing Africa, and the co-founder of Ace Foods and Sahel Consulting, Agriculture and Nutrition. Ndidi will introduce the vision of Changing Narratives Africa and then moderate our distinguished panel. Just for housekeeping purposes, I just want to remind everyone to please put your questions either in the chat box or in the Q&A box, and to tweet and retweet the powerful insights that our panelists generate. Once again, we'll put those handles in the chat box for ease of reference. Thank you, and over to you, Ndidi.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to all of you. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, Akego. Thank you to Dr. Ed Mbaya for that excellent keynote address. It's truly a privilege and a pleasure to welcome you here today. I know with the UN Food Systems Summit, there's so many programs going on concurrently at this time. Many of us are being pulled in different directions, but we are so honored that you've taken the time out of your busy schedules to join us today. And I really hope that we have a fulfilling and enriching discussion. I have a short presentation that I'm going to take you through just to introduce Changing Narratives Africa, and then we'll go into our panel discussion. We have an amazing panel. So Ed ended by really showcasing why we started Changing Narratives in the first place. The first reason was that when we think about the way the rest of the world views Africa, and a study was done by UCLA looking at over 700,000 hours of programming on television. 3 key takeaways: Africa and Africans barely register on US television. Depictions of Africa are broadly negative, and Africa is portrayed as a country, not a continent. So we believe at Changing Narratives Africa that we have to tell positive stories about Africa, and that food plays a critical role in bridging that divide. In addition, when we think about Africa's contribution to world trade, right now we only contribute 2% to global trade. That is a abysmal number. If we increase it just from 2% to 3%, we generate $70 billion additional worth of revenue for the continent. And food is such a powerful component of global trade. Ed showed the numbers. We currently export about $40 billion worth of food, but we could be exporting $100 billion, $1 trillion worth of food, because we're naturally endowed for agricultural excellence. So at Changing Narratives Africa, we want to change the way the rest of the world views Africa through its food. Not only because our food is amazing, and all of you who are from Africa know that it's a best kept secret, because we always rank the lowest in global rankings of food, but the rest of the world does not know about our food or how we've contributed to food history, like Ed talked about. From the onset, we've constituted an amazing advisory board at Changing Narratives Africa, and I'm so proud of all the distinguished individuals who've joined us as advisory board members. And if you're here today, I'm giving you a special shout out and thank you for your support. They're composed of experts, individuals who are entrepreneurs who are already exporting, as well as financiers and individuals in the global food supply chain. So what are we starting with as our early services? First, we're amplifying Africa's impact on the global food ecosystem through our documentaries, articles, podcasts, and social media to tell the stories that Ed started telling of the great food from our continent. The second is a product gateway. And we've launched a Narrative Changes African Food Fellowship, which is still ongoing, to identify entrepreneurs who are ready to take their brands to the world. And finally, linkages and convenings. This is one opportunity today to start connecting with each other. And we hope that many of you connect with each other today, but also join us for future events throughout the year. We're going to be having Africa Food Festivals, conferences, events in partnership with organizations across the board to really build bridges between African food entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs in the rest of the world. What is our direct impact that we hope to achieve? So we want to increase local sourcing from Africa. If food is sourced locally, we create jobs, we improve the lives of our farmers, and we empower our youth. We want to ensure that at least 50% of those who we support, our entrepreneurs, are women, and we're going to have equitable engagement of women throughout the distribution and supply chains that we're building. And then we believe in building bridges and amplifying our voices through media. Through the Narrative Changes African Food Fellowship, the deadline is October 1st, so please tell other people to join. We're going to be supporting food entrepreneurs with training, access to finance, access to certification, and support to get their brands on global shelves. And I've had some very exciting discussions with some of the major global retailers that are excited about engaging with our African entrepreneurs. We also have just created our first draft podcast, and we expect to have many more. And thanks to Akego, it's called Crazy for Coffee, Embrace Its Roots. And it's all about how coffee was born in Ethiopia, and Ethiopian coffee is amazing. We're celebrating entrepreneurs through this, but also showcasing how Africa has given us one of the best beverages in the world. And we're going to be doing similar podcasts with support from people like you to make sure that we get these on radios like NPR stations all over the world. And hopefully we'll be creating some very high quality documentaries and short films to also change mindsets. So that's really Changing Narratives Africa in a nutshell. Please visit our website, please follow us on social media, and please tell other people about this amazing platform. It's something I felt very compelled to start after realizing that, we're doing such great work, but the rest of the world doesn't know about it. So now moving swiftly into the panel, and we have an amazing group of panelists. Paul Newman, who is the director of the SDG2 Advocacy Hub and coordinator of the Chef's Manifesto. Michael Alebede, who is a chef and owner of Itan Test Kitchen. We have Emeka Okafor, who is the co-founder of Maker Faire Africa and a TED Fellows Program lead. Prateet Spencer, who is the co-founder of Ayo Foods. And last but not the least, we have Muki Makura, who is the executive director of Africa No Filters. And I'm just so excited to engage in discussion with these distinguished people who are doing wonderful work across the board to truly transform our food ecosystem, but also change the way that we view food. And I'm going to start off with Paul. Paul, so let's set the stage. For the past year, key actors in the public, private, and nonprofit sectors have been generating game-changing solutions. What role has Africa played in the process for the UN Food System Summit, which is holding in just 2 days? And what role do you see Africa playing post the UN Food System Summit? Welcome, Paul.
Thank you, Ndidi. And this is just such an honor to be with you today and to be a part of this conversation. I really think this is an important conversation, and it's an important conversation as part of the broader dialogues around food systems, because I think the storytelling and the narrative is how we often engage with food. It's how we connect. And I would say on the UN Food Systems Summit process, Africa's been playing a big role in this process. Africa's been very central. I know yourself, you've been involved. The special envoy obviously is from Rwanda, and so has been centrally driving this as well. But since it's been announced, there's been global, independent, and member state dialogues that have been happening across the continent. And these conversations have gone beyond the summit. There's been a number of youth voices involved, hosting dialogues across the continent, engaging the next generation, and really ensuring that those voices are being heard. One of the things that I do is coordinate a network of chefs, and it's great to see Chef Michael Elegbede on, who's a part of that network, working around the Sustainable Development Goals. But it's been great to see many chefs featuring in the pre-summit, featuring in conversations, dialoguing from a food perspective, talking as the connector between farm to fork. So talking about how do you take these ingredients, how do we showcase them on a plate, how do we talk about the story of African food and different cuisines across the continent in such a way that shows the cultures, the stories, the traditions that and the delicious ingredients, I think. And also talks a lot about the identity of where did that food come from, what different parts. So this has been really good. It was interesting to see at the pre-summit, President Kagame presented a common African position to transform food systems for people and planet. And it included adopting food policies, expanding things like school feeding, working to increase ag financing, focusing on research, investing in climate data systems, and empowering female smallholder farmers. So it's exciting to see this kind of leadership coming across Africa on food systems. But I think, you know, as food systems, it's also about how we implement this on the ground. And we've been discussing at the global level for the last 18 months, but the real food system changes at the regional and the national level and the local level if we're going to achieve the SDGs. And so it's really great to see African leaders out in front of this, driving that change. We hope that continues through to COP and Nutrition for Growth. And I think one of the key things is just this connection between conversations around food and farmers. And I think Doctor really shared this kind of commodification that often happens. And I think what we need to do is talk about the cuisines, we talk about the flavor, the taste, the traditions, to add that value to the story. And that we're not just talking about what we produce, but we're also talking about how we engage with it, what it means to us and what it means to the world. And you framed beautifully about the podcast talking about coffee. And there's so many of these stories that start in different parts of Africa and have been somehow co-opted in different parts of the world and need to be re-established as very strong African narratives. And so I think this is really key. I think this is key for the UN Food Systems Summit and key to see that leadership really drive, that participation really drive forward those results. So it's super exciting to be with you today.
Thank you so much, Paul. It's always a breath of fresh air to talk to you because you always have such optimism. And I have one quick question. Just tell us a bit about your own campaign, because you've been leading a very exciting campaign, and how can Africans get involved in that campaign?
Yeah, so one of the questions, and it goes really to what Dr. Mabaya was talking about, which, you know, is the narrative is sometimes wrong. The narrative around food is often around food security, and it's about, it comes from a perspective of what's missing rather than celebrating what we should be celebrating. And so we've called the campaign Good Food for All. It's been adopted by the UN, and we're really trying to use this to celebrate the diversity of what good food looks like. Good food has so much more than just what it does for your body, your health. It's also about the farmer, it's about the livelihoods, but it also comes from you know, traditions, culture, all these other elements. And so we're instead of trying to describe what good food means, we're actually asking the question, what does good food mean? And it's been great to have so many voices from across the continent, but we need more. We need these voices to claim and to actually share what they believe good food means and how we can then drive that forward for all. Because when you ask people about food, they light up. They start to talk about what they enjoy or how they like to prepare something or what their favorite dish is. And this is the kind of energy I think we need to actually fix our food system. We need this positive ownership, this positive story, these narratives which really open up opportunity, open up the future, but also connect that back to the past, to the stories that we all have built on and that we come from. And so I think this campaign, we'd love to have more voices from across the continent, diversity of voices, all the countries represented, all the different tribal groups, all the different backgrounds, you know, from entrepreneurs right through to nutritionists to all kinds of different perspectives from the food space.
Thank you so much. I'm going to move swiftly now to Michael. And Michael, just briefly introduce yourself and then because you're doing such pioneering work in the food ecosystem, and I'm just so amazed. You've been such an integral part of the process for shaping the future of food and Africa's role. What gives you hope about the future, and what gives you the most significant concern? Michael. I assume Michael is with us. Yes, go ahead. I can see you.
Hi, Didi. How are you?
Very well. Go ahead. Did you get my question?
I did get your question.
Okay.
Am I visible? Okay. My name is Michael Olegbede, and I'm a chef here in Lagos, Nigeria. I work very closely in expressing Nigerian food in diverse ways, both nationally and globally. I also work quite actively in the food systems and how to help the Nigerian food system, and which inherently is helping African food system in general. To your question, what am I most optimistic? What am I most what do I see in African food culture that I think is really, really driving our food system forward is the youth. I'm seeing a lot of innovation in our youth. I'm seeing a lot of innovation to almost take back that narrative of what it means to express our food, to what it means to express our cuisine, using indigenous ingredients in diverse ways. I'm seeing a lot more African chefs expressing themselves through food. I'm seeing a lot more artisanal farmers creating biodiversity in the food system. I'm seeing artisans in the food space. I'm seeing food products that are made from ingredients that are indigenous to us. That is something that is making me happy about our food system, because we are the future. And the more of us actively playing a role in diversifying the reality in our food system, the better the future will be. What I'm concerned about is the role our government is playing in this reality. It almost seems like across Africa, the more people are trying to push things forward, the more the government are pushing us back. And this is quite heartbreaking, because it's discouraging. And I think what you're doing in creating platforms that help these discussions, and so as Paul, we've had a lot of this discussion in Chef Manifesto. This reality is, how can we bridge that gap? How can we help a system without the involvement of the government? And if they do have to be involved, in a way that is not diabolic to the growth and the efforts of the people trying to move the system forward.
Thank you, Michael. And we'll come back to you to push forward on that, because somehow you're finding a way to work in spite of it, right? And you're building a community locally that's able to drive that. And we applaud you for those efforts. I'm going to move now to Emeka Okafor, who is an innovator and has been working at the crux of innovation, showcasing entrepreneurs from Africa and the diaspora who are leading positive change for close to 2 decades. Emeka, building on Michael's point about young entrepreneurs and innovators, what excites you about what they're leading in the food ecosystem, and what barriers remain, and how can we address them?
Unmute. Oh, sorry. Can you hear me? Can everyone hear me? Okay. Yes. So what are young African innovators doing that is notable? I would say that it's a broad swath of activity that has picked up in more ways than one, that I find more exciting than I've ever been. It ranges from people who are working in the area of, at the bleeding edge, food synthesis, synthetic biology, and so forth, by Africans, right down to what is happening on the field with machinery that is being built to process the food, and research that's being done to improve the yield and productivity of the products we have. I like to look at all these areas as critical if we're going to build the most out of our developing food supply ecosystem. And why is this critically important? If we look at the history of most developed and much more developing countries, the food systems formed the foundation for what later became an industrial economy. And if we're not, I sometimes get the sense that it's not appreciated enough the extent to which the food systems and agriculture which supports them could become the engine by which we pull forth a whole bunch of other sectors while we address a range of problems and challenges that bedevil many African countries. I got involved in this almost by having an interest in what entrepreneurs were doing, as you said, almost 20 years ago. It doesn't seem like that in 2003 when I started showcasing various individuals and companies and initiatives. Over the past number of years, I put together almost 14,000 posts and stories, of which about 1,500 were in the food space. And what has come to my notice is the extent to which we're seeing activity in terms of its depth and breadth that we hadn't ever seen before. And it's the young people that are driving this. It's the young and those who are curious that are building out the space, whether it's in the diaspora or locally, whether it's in the areas of production, research, or as I mentioned earlier, synthetic biology. I would like to at least point to this particular story around synthetic biology because I found that particularly interesting. There's a young man that I came across who is from Nigeria, of West African descent, who is working in the area of using synthetic biology as a tool to recreate one of our most heralded drinks, which is palm wine. If you put that or juxtapose that with what is happening in the broader synthetic biology space, you can say that we're well represented. We're represented where the rubber meets the road as far as what food, how can we imagine food tomorrow, where we have more and more people, as was pointed out by the earlier speaker, broadening the interest in food, in restaurants, in processing across the world, not just here in the United States and other countries in the West. The question is, how can we catalyze, heighten, and strengthen these trends? To what extent can we make food in all its breadth something that becomes so much more attractive to young people who might not yet see it as a path to take? And I think, Ndidi, with your initiatives, this is one of the key benefits, the fact that we can find a way to broaden the idea of what opportunity is within the food space. And I think that people might not even realize what those opportunities are. So I can speak to them at greater length, but I will close by saying that it is exciting. The breadth is much bigger, it's deeper. We're finding people that are working in areas that we wouldn't even have known about 5 years ago. So this is something that I find quite exciting within the entire space of entrepreneurship and innovation. And it's something that I think all of us would like to see or encourage in individual ways and more. So I'll stop there, but it's something that I'd like to speak to further down the conversation.
Thank you so much, Emeka. It's interesting. Amarula and palm wine seem to be leading the day. I'm going to move swiftly to Prateek. I got to meet her in Chicago just a few weeks ago, and I was so excited about what Aya Foods is doing in America. In just under 1 year, they've experienced exponential growth. Prateek, just tell us about your work, your vision, and then address how other entrepreneurs can step into this role of bridging the gap between Africa and the rest of the world.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. So excited to be a part of this group today. I think it's important that we're having these collaborative discussions about how we work together. So appreciate the forum today. As a little bit about IO, we launched in the midst of the pandemic. We would have never planned for that. So July of 2020, really with the vision of celebrating the ingredients and flavors of the West African diaspora. And that was driven by a few things. One was just me selfishly wanting more of the food that I grew up eating, easily accessible, but also saw this just interesting momentum happening across the retail landscape with really consumers driving change for more bolder, differentiated flavors. And our food was just not represented. And so it's been really exciting to see retail embrace us. Indeed, as you mentioned, we started in about 50 stores last July, and we're on track to be nationwide and close to 4,000 retail doors across the US by the end of the year. So really exciting. But as I think about kind of the vision for IO, one of our beliefs is that you should be able to walk into any store and see food that represents your culture. And we think that's really a birthright. And so we really hope to play that role in bridging the gap across the store and ultimately touching on the layers that Dr. Mabaya talked about earlier today, commodity, cuisine, and brand. And so we think as a brand, we're actually uniquely positioned to pull through that supply chain to drive meaningful impact. One of our seed initiatives was to invest in about 15 acres of farmland in Liberia through an organization called Girl Power Africa. And that launched in December. It was kind of raw land, and we're already seeing kind of the fruits of that labor kind of pay off, and that yield really driving meaningful change in those communities. And so, and I'd say that's just a small scale. We're just getting started, but I think a great example of us working together to drive meaningful change across the ecosystem. I do think entrepreneurs play such an important role in really continuing to surface that fresh thinking. And, for us, I think a big part of our quick trajectory has been engaging the right collaborators to move quickly. So excited to partner with everyone today.
Thank you so much, Prateet. One follow-on question for you, which is, you told me that non-Africans are eating your food, cassava leaf stew, egusi soup, jollof rice. What do you think is making, Middle America buy IO foods? And this experimentation, what can we do to drive more of that demand?
Yeah, I think there are a couple of things. Some of it was touched on earlier. Actually, a lot of it was, one, the food is delicious, right? And so I think that is hard to ignore, that the food is just so tasty. And the fact that folks, particularly in the pandemic, were looking to kind of adapt their routines. I think what we provide with IO is a way to explore the flavors of the diaspora in a very easy format. And, going into frozen was super intentional for that reason. We wanted to make it easy. And so I often joke that, we do all the work, we do all the sourcing. We're not shortcutting our processes at all, but we want it to make it easy. My family is Liberian, and cassava leaf is like our go-to dish. And I always said, I want to make it really easy to have like cassava leaf on a Tuesday night, and for that not to become a 4-hour production. So I think that's part of it. But I think the other piece that can't be ignored is you have some really rich nutrients that are coming. So as you think about even our IO dishes, you have things like egusi seeds, which are incredibly protein rich. You've got sorghum leaves in our wache, which are really rich in antioxidants. And so there are these like inherent nutritional benefits that for far too long have just like been ignored or untapped. That as the broader movement towards health and wellness shifts, present another opportunity for us to really spotlight the richness of heritage African ingredients.
Thank you so much. And we're going to be breaking into groups soon where you can hear from entrepreneurs who have done, are doing great work on the ground and engage with them. So thank you, Prateet, for your story. So inspirational. Last but not the least is Muki. And Muki runs Africa No Filters and has been working really at the forefront, pioneering, changing narratives. And so Muki, you've heard all these stories. What can we do to shift narratives on African food? How can we effectively engage with local and international media in North America, Europe, and Asia to really share some of these emerging success stories and to amplify their voices? Welcome, Muki.
Great. Thanks, Ndidi. I mean, it's really actually interesting to hear what people are saying. And I think the presentation that Edward Mabaya did was really interesting. In terms of how people see food. So Africa No Filter, we kind of look at narrative generally, not specifically food narrative, but what we did just ahead of this, we sort of did a scan of media to see how they're covering food in Africa. And the names of the words that came up consistently were food systems and food security. So in the context of food in Africa, that is what we're known for. And I think if you generally look at how Africa is covered generally, it is really around 5 frames. There are 5 things that, if you look at any story in Africa, it's usually about poverty, it's usually about poor leadership, about corruption, conflict, and disease. And food is written about in that context, because I think the way we cover food is really around development. If you look globally at around how food is covered and what the narratives are around food, there's business, food in the context of business and making money and brands. There's food in the context of development, which is really where Africa sits. And then there's food in the context of leisure. And it's more the pop culture, it's the dining out, it's the restaurant references. And Africa's not in that space yet. And I think there's a lot of reasons for it. I think these are some of the things that we're talking about now. But from a personal perspective, I really realized that we need to strengthen the brands, the packaging, the convenience of foods. And I think that the previous speaker just said, she wants to be able to have cassava stew on a Tuesday night. Traditionally, you couldn't. And I think we have to do a lot more about evolving food. Because if you look at how food is covered, in some of the headlines I was looking at, it was around innovation. If you look at things like Impossible Burger, what we're doing in terms of meats, trying to make meat from a cell, developing plant-based meats, that's innovation. And that's what media covers. So to come to the second half of your question about how do we get African food into media spaces, media covers news. So we've got to innovate. We've got to put interesting things in front of media. So entrepreneurs doing amazing things. Are Your Food sounds like it's really doing interesting things. I'd love to see somebody in Middle America eating cassava stew. I mean, that's interesting. Innovation, that's interesting. And I think we as Africans, first of all, need to be our own ambassadors. The context of this, in the environment in which this webinar is going on, is exactly where we expect to talk about food within a UN webinar, conference about food security, about, food systems. We have to stop talking about food in Africa in that context, because we are so much more. The things that people talk about is cuisine, and I like this food. We don't talk about food systems, we don't talk about food security, so if we want to move into mainstream media, we've got to drop that language. Absolutely have to drop that language. We've got to take food out of the development sector, because that is the single story of African food. It is the development sector, it's food systems, it's, smallholder farmers. In fact, I actually have the words in front of me. It's hunger, agriculture, resilience, malnutrition. These are the words. These are the words that are associated with food in Africa. So we need to drop that. We need to take ourselves out of that context and put ourselves in a space where actually it's sexier, so that there's media interest in what we're doing. We're innovating, we're building brands, and we're targeting pop culture. Now, when we think about things like, Japanese food or, Indian food or cuisine, there's a lot of references we have, and it's not UN food webinars, it's movies, right? It's cooking shows, it's pop culture. So we need to shift the discussions and conversations around food out of this development space into pop culture. And I'll stop. There's a couple of people doing stuff. I don't know if you guys remember the guy who did the Fufu Challenge. You know, it's a guy called, he's a, I don't know, US based guy, I had his name. And he he films himself eating African food, and he kicked off this thing that went viral, Fufu Challenge. And he was, you know, eating fufu, and people were eating fufu. That's pop culture. That's how we get things happening. You need cool, young, interesting people being seen to be eating our food and doing things with our food. So I think we've got a long way to go, but I definitely think we're on the right trajectory. And I think, indeed, the things you are doing with your new organization is exactly where we want to be. It's a podcast, it's the content that sort of showcases our food in a totally different light. Because right now, you know, as the Edward Mabaya said at the beginning, there is a single story of food in Africa. And unfortunately, we've become a little bit stuck there.
Thank you so much, Muki. And definitely we've been talking about the Fufu Challenge and how we're going to launch all sorts of new challenges with the help of key stakeholders, influencers, celebrities in the diaspora, on the continent, to really shift that. And why we're having this on the sidelines of the UN Food Systems Summit is because all the other conversations going on are exactly what you talked about. And we wanted to kind of disrupt this and have a different conversation. In fact, as we speak now, there are 2 other parallel sessions that are probably talking about Africa and hunger and Africa and malnutrition, not showcasing the innovations, the IO foods, the exciting companies that are Feduna that we're going to be hearing about shortly. Sweet Kiwi, all the great people doing wonderful work, the Michael Elebwede and Itan Kitchen. So we want to definitely shake it up, and we completely agree with you. So thank you so much, Muki. We're really out of time, and we want to give at least 30 minutes for our panel. So I'm going to come back to each of you for our breakouts. I'm going to come back to each of you to just give us a charge. I think Muki has given us a charge. Get out of the old, step into the new. Let's hear from you, Paul. What's your charge for the audience today? What can we take away?
Yeah, look, I've been listening intently, and I think I agree with you, Muki. It is getting into a conversation about food. And I think it's talking about, you know, how everyday people talk about food. So flavor, taste, you know, ingredients that are, you know, the terroir, where they come from, the story. And so I think the more we do this, I actually believe it will address the food security issues. It will address some of these others, because value will be created in the ingredients, pride, and that will actually shift many of those issues. We need to address them, but I also think we really need to get everyone thinking about food and the central role that it plays in our culture and our economy and our health.
Thank you, Paul. Michael, your charge.
As a chef, I'm a firm believer in what people eat and how that experiences around the way people eat, how that stays with them. I think what I would like to charge people with is to create environments that allows more representation of African chefs and African food, support African chefs. You know, it's especially doing this in Africa. It's sometimes ironic that the most support African chefs, especially those who are quite innovative with African cuisine, are from people that are not African. I think we have to get ourselves away from that mentality that our food can't be in spaces that are on the same platform as French cuisine, as Italian cuisine, as Japanese cuisine. We have to allow ourselves that right to look at our food in very dynamic, experiential ways. And before it gets to stores, Dr. Edward talked about our food going into grocery stores. The reason why Italian food are in grocery stores is because people have references and experiences with Italian food and want to replicate it. Until we begin to share our experiences around food with other people, both nationally and internationally, the demand is never going to be there. And we're just going to be going through this spiral. So that's what I charge people with. Let's create a space. Let's change our mentality of our food so that it can be represented in global spaces.
Thank you, Michael. I hear you loud and clear, and I am coming to Itan Kitchen very soon. Let's move on to Emeka. Please give us your charge. 1 minute, Emeka, please. You have to unmute.
Oh, sorry. Sorry about that. My charge would be is that we need to see food as a bridge. It's exciting. It's full of innovation. It's full of invention. It's a key wealth creating mechanism at all levels. And it's at a foundation for industrialization, entertainment, and everything else in between. There's so much more to food than how it's currently being characterized around Africa. And the examples are increasing and the opportunities are endless. And I think reframing it is something that we should look to do even more so. And so that would be my charge.
I love it. I love it. You're speaking my language, Emeka. Prateet, what is your charge?
I think the old adage here of it takes a village is like very true of our total global food ecosystem, in that my charge to this group would be find, 2 or 3 people on this chat today and connect on how you might collaborate to advance our goal of building a more inclusive food system that represents our food. I think for us, a key to our success has been partnering with others outside of our direct space to really amplify the African kind of ingredients in food culture. So I'd encourage everyone on this call to reach out to a couple people, and I think you'd be a bit amazed by kind of what comes out of that.
Thank you so much. And Muki, last but not least.
And you give me a chance. Yeah, I think, for me, what I'm hearing, not here, but just generally, is that we need to sort of and decolonize ourselves from the old attitudes of how, the West saw our own food. I think, we begin to think it's cooler to eat McDonald's and, to be eating haute cuisine from Paris and Italy. We need to find that in our own food. And I think once we do that, because Africa itself is a market, right? It's great to be able to target global markets, but even if we can just build our brands in Africa alone, that's big enough business. But we've got to start with ourselves.
Thank you so much. Decolonize your mind, free your mind, embrace African food, and serve as African food champions locally and globally. Fantastic. Thank you so much to our panel. Please join me in giving them a round of applause. I know some of you have been sending them questions and sending me comments, so we really appreciate you. Thank you so much. Excellent panel, excellent panel. Thank you very much. Please stick with us because we have an amazing breakout session coming up. We've eaten into a bit of their time, but I'll ask Akwego to please introduce our breakout sessions, and then we can quickly jump into the breakout sessions. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ndidi. What an amazing panel. I trust you were inspired and gained some insight from the stories and action points that were shared. Thank you once again to our distinguished panel. Now, as Ndidi said, we want to engage you directly in discussion via our breakout sessions. We've assembled a fantastic group of entrepreneurs and business leaders who will facilitate the conversations in each room. Breakout session 1 is titled The Next Chipotle, Removing Barriers to Getting African Cuisine into Mainstream America. This will be facilitated by Ruth Nakara, the founder of Foodetta, a fast, casual West African restaurant in Philadelphia. She'll be supported by Folake of Sahel Consulting. Sahel Consulting is supporting all our panels, so thank you so much to them. The second panel, the second breakout session, is titled Getting African Food Products on Global Grocery Shelves. This will be facilitated by Ehime Aiwe Akindele, the founder and CEO of Sweet Kiwi. Her company was founded in Nigeria, moved to the US, and her products are available in grocery stores across the country. She'll be supported by Aisha, also of Sahel Consulting. Breakout session 3 is the role of African governments in supporting African food exports. This will be facilitated by Temi Jebutu, the managing director at Ace Foods. He has led the company's growth and drives exports of spices globally. He'll be supported by Abimbola. And the last session is on aviation as an accelerator for food tourism and logistics. This will be facilitated by Adefunke Adeyemi, the regional director Advocacy and Strategic Relationships at IATA. That's the International Air Transport Association. She's also the founder of 54/7. She'll be supported by Fisaya of Sahel Consulting. On the screen, the different breakout sessions should be coming up. Please click on the session that is of most interest to you, and enjoy your sessions.
Welcome back. We're going to be rounding up soon. I think people are joining us. Okay, go over to you.
Welcome back, everyone. Welcome back from your breakout sessions. I hope you enjoyed those sessions. Thank you for sticking with us so far. Unfortunately, we've run out of time, so I'm going to have to invite Ndidi to close us out. Thank you all so much.
I want to thank our breakout session leaders. You guys were amazing. And I think some interesting discussions were happening in all of the sessions. So thank you, Temi. Thank you, Funke. Thank you, Ahime. Thank you, Ruth. I learned a lot. And because we've reached the time when our session is supposed to end, we can't have the 1 minute rapid fire debriefs, but we're going to have to post, unless you guys can commit to 30 seconds. Can you commit to 30 seconds and will people stick with us? All right, let's do 30 seconds. Ruth, 30 seconds. What is your charge and your key takeaway from today that you want people to take away?
Key takeaway for me as the owner of a fast casual West African brand is to not be afraid to partner with more mainstream brands to get your name out there. Targeting Instagram influencers, I've found great success going down that path. What else? Not seeing other African brands as competition, but as opportunities to collaborate and just amplify our brand. And yeah, I think that 30 seconds.
Thank you, Ruth. We're so proud of you. Keep up the great work. Ahime, you're doing phenomenal work, and Ahime has the best yogurt. If you haven't tried it, please do. Sweet Kiwi, what's your key takeaway you want people to share going forward? Ahime, are you still with us?
Yes, I'm right here. I didn't know I was on mute, sorry. My key charge is to continue to build foundations strong enough so that more African entrepreneurs can also build and have the opportunity to display just their awesomeness on global grocery shelves.
Thank you, Ahime. Keep up the great work. Temi, what's your charge?
So my charge is, we have to see beyond the challenges. It's there's a quite of reasons why we should not be pushing. But then, like I've said, despite all of the challenges for us, we continue to grow as a business. I also want everybody to continue to see that. And like we've said earlier, let's also assist each other. Let's help each other. Our trade should start from one another. So I want to see so many people calling Ace Food. How can we buy from you? How can we do business with you? And we would also be doing the same to a number of entrepreneurs here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Temi. And last but not least, Funke. Logistics is our bane. What's your charge for us?
Well, the charge is aviation is the fastest and most efficient means to move things around, especially food, whether it's it's in its perishable state, or it is in cuisine, or in the finished manufactured brand. The other thing is, don't be afraid to use aviation. It is a leapfrogging technology, the same way that mobile telephony was for landlines in Africa. And look at how that transformed the entire landscape of entrepreneurship on the continent. The final thing is that collaboration is critical. And so cross-sector collaboration across the aviation ecosystem, but also across the agro-business ecosystem and governments and other institutions are really important. And we're happy to work together. Thank you.
Thank you so much. My heart is so full today because I've just been so inspired by the dynamic entrepreneurs, professionals, change agents that we've heard from today. So my job is simply to thank all of you. Changing Narratives Africa was just a seed that God laid in my heart in June this year. And to see that we're already generating momentum and sharing ideas and building those bridges just gives me so much joy. So thank you to Ed. Thank you to our dynamic panel. Thank you to our wonderful breakout session leads. Thank you to Akego for excellent moderation. Thank you to the partners, Nourishing Africa, Dine Diaspora, Sahel Consulting. Thank you to the wonderful Sahel Consulting team members. And thank you, Bolaji, our ICT manager, for all your support. Please follow us on Changing Narratives Africa. Please reach out on how we can partner. And if you know entrepreneurs who should be part of our Changing Narratives Fellowship, which will get more brands on African and global shelves, Please have them register. The deadline is October 1st, and we're being very firm on that deadline. We've already received hundreds of applications. We look forward to partnering with you all. God bless you all. Enjoy the rest of your day, and please stay in touch. Bye, everyone. Thank you again. Bye. Thank you so much, everyone. God bless you all.
Bye-bye.